symbol NNE here, Nano. We're looking at this name because it began trading last year. The stock has risen 400% since the IPO last spring. It's one of the top performing IPOs last year. So we welcome to the network James Walker, CEO of NANO Nuclear Energy. Thank you so much for being here. I was just saying how nuclear maybe used to be a little bit of a taboo word, and now it's good news for folks when it comes to energy. Good to see you, James. Thanks for being here.
Good to see you too, Nicole.
Different vibes these days.
Very different vibes. I think support domestically for nuclear is at an all-time high. So.
And how about this IPO? I mean, did you ever figure it would take off the way it did?
We knew that there was a public want to be involved in the space, and there wasn't many places where the investment could go. So we had good expectations, but I think this exceeded our expectations.
So, and you're a nuclear physicist yourself with all kinds of engineering degrees, so you're fully immersed. When we think about nuclear power, cleaner energy, right?
Yes.
Is this the way, I mean, the wave of the future?
It's clean energy. You can put it wherever you want. It has the highest capacity factor of any form of energy, which means consistency. So if you want to put power anywhere, get it consistently, have zero carbon emissions, you know, it has to be nuclear.
And you've been working with the Department of Energy as well, right? How is that going?
We have. So the Department of Energy has taken a really proactive stance on building back a lot of the domestic infrastructure in the country. They've invested billions back into companies like ours and others to put this supply chain back in place so the US can manufacture the fuel that it needs to power all of these big systems.
So at this point now, we think about a miniature mobile nuclear power plant in a truck. I mean, do people get that? It's going to be hard for them to get that.
It will be.
Explain that concept and how many plants are we talking about? What kind of demand are you seeing from coast to coast?
So this is going to be a very new industry for everybody, but there's going to be a range of different products that are going to be available from a range of different companies. There's going to be big reactors, medium-sized, small reactors. The smallest ones, as you say, will be on the back of a truck, and they'll deploy to remote areas where they can be put down and plugged in and just start outputting power. And then the medium-sized reactors where everything will still be modular, and you'll be able to transport everything by road and assemble it at the site. And then the bigger systems that'll be produced, that'll be built at site. But it's still a new wave of technologies that we've not seen before.
And now introduced on U.S. campuses, university campuses. Do you expect that to keep growing? What kind of demand are you seeing?
So there's a huge demand for nuclear in general, but the advantage of building with universities is that it's treated as a research reactor by the regulator, which allows for a more inexpensive process to get a licensed product out there. So we have a reactor that we're building with the University of Illinois at the moment. We're just about to start drilling work for the geological characterization of the site. Then we'll put in for a permit to construct. But we're not the only ones thinking in this way. Like, there'll be a number of different companies that are looking to groups like Texas A&M as an example to build their research reactors, so to get a licensed product, and then at that point you can start commercially selling these systems.
What are some of the consulting services that you do? That companies may come to you and you work with them, what?
So this is the interesting part, because there's a bit of a squeeze on personnel now. There's this huge demand for nuclear, and there's not enough nuclear engineers to go around. So we've had a big interest from a lot of different vendors and companies to acquire services, to acquire our expertise, to utilize our engineers to examine anything from, could we deploy these reactors in South Korea? How would we move the waste material? I mean, there's a big market here, potential, while we're building these reactors, to establish ourselves in revenue, consulting, transportation, all these different areas.
I mean, we were talking about AI and data centers, and one of the things was having nuclear energy. And while this word was taboo, you were saying, you know, psychology, because it used to be a bad thing or a scary thing, and now it's so prevalent and helpful. And you talked about some of the hyperscalers even, and working with them and what their needs are. What are their needs now in the next year or 10 years?
So it's interesting, because the tech industry are almost going all in on nuclear now. It's coming at the same time as the electrification of the country, the reindustrialization of it. So the US needs power, and it needs a lot of
names. Like what kind of tech names?
Microsoft at 3 Mile Island, AWS or Amazon, they put $500 million into X Energy. There's a number of groups that are becoming more involved in nuclear, and the reason is that they foresee the projected demands of their AI and data centers exceeding what the grid can currently produce for them. So they need backup solutions. And with nuclear, you can get a really consistent form of power and baseload power. And for these data centers, maybe they can sustain 20, 30 minutes of downtime a year. So that's perfect for nuclear. And you can put it anywhere. If you want to put it in the middle of Wyoming, in the middle of the desert, nuclear can go there. And so they want to de-risk their own business. They want to keep sophisticating their technology. So they're investing very heavily into nuclear.
And Oracle too, right? You had
Yes,
Oracle
and
on
Oracle
that
too,
list.
yeah.
What kind of, and the administration, the regulatory environment, are you finding the administration to be friendly towards what you're trying to do?
So, certainly, like the good part is that like everybody that we've spoken to within the federal regulator, they are very agreeable to the new wave of nuclear technologies coming out, and there's a willingness amongst them to try and reform a lot of their frameworks, how they license to accommodate all this new tech. Now they do have their bureaucratic processes, and they are trying to work through how they do make things easier for new companies, and that's still ongoing. But like the good part is the will is there to reform.
Are there the never-ending hurdles in this business? I mean, it sounds like no matter how much you build, we need more.
Yes, so like it's interesting because the US is at a point now where it's building back a lot of its fuel supply chain. I think that's going to be the big bottleneck for all of these systems. If the fuel supply chain was in place within the US already, these reactors would be going out the door and being deployed a lot sooner. We will resolve that. The DOE, private companies like ours, we are getting involved in that space to do it. And the good part is the US will be a leading country in the world to deploy these tech. When it comes to advanced reactor systems, I'd say the US is in the lead when it comes to this area. So.
If you were to draw the pie and the nuclear energy that you're providing, our country has and uses, not just your company, is that growing? I mean, what percentage of, you talked about electrification, we talked about carbon zero emissions, things like that. We have all kinds of things that we're advancing in. Yeah. Where does nuclear stand, and how much of the pie will it have in the years ahead?
It's a good question, because at the moment the nuclear has always provided somewhere in the region of about 20% of the US's power.
Okay.
Now, the projected energy demand is like 160, 200% of what is currently being produced for all the tech centers, all the tech industry, reindustrialization, electrification. Now, what percentage will be nuclear? It could be quite substantial. Like it could be anything from 30, 40%. It could go as high as 50%. The good thing about the US is it's a very diverse country and it's got a lot of resources. And it can draw from natural gas, it can use fossil fuels, it can still utilize wind and solar and geothermal and hydro, and these systems can all work alongside each other. But for specific applications, nuclear is much better suited for if you want to be removed from the grid, if the solar conditions aren't optimal for solar panels, or wind conditions aren't optimal, or you don't have access to hydro or geothermal, you go nuclear. And there's a push from industry to decarbonize, and that's going to obviously drive a lot of this domestic demand for nuclear.
Yeah, pretty amazing. Well, the stock was as low as $3 in the last 52 weeks. Right now it's at $20 and change, so a nice run there. But to your point, we're going to need double. You said over 100% of what we have now. So if you're at 20%, that brings you to the 30, the 40, the 50. That's double or so, right? Okay, it's great to see you. Thanks for being here, James. James Walker, CEO of NANO Nuclear Energy. Thanks for being here with us at the New York Stock Exchange. See you again soon.